Hi, everybody. Welcome to Two Off the First. This is the first live edition of this show. It's pretty wild that it's taken me a while to do this, but we do a daily podcast Monday through Friday, and we can talk about the two biggest issues of the game. I'm Ryan Ballingy with Golf News Net. Thanks for tuning in on our social channels. We're going to try to make this a weekday thing, like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, at least to start, just to kind of see how this goes. And then, Thursday, Friday, obviously people are watching golf. You don't want to watch me. So we probably won't do this on Thursdays or Fridays, at least for a while, see how it goes, and we'll go from there. So got a couple stories to get to today, and we're glad to have you here with us, and we're going to pull those up for you. So we're going to talk about a couple things that came out of yesterday from the news conferences leading into the Memorial Tournament. Heard from Jack Nicklaus, as is usually the case at Muirfield Village. We also heard from Scottie Scheffler, who talked about kind of his entire ordeal in the legal process and the legal system, and kind of the thoughts about potentially suing in Louisville and all those kinds of things. So we're going to talk about all of that here today. I do want to throw in for a couple of minutes, because we haven't had an episode in the last few days trying to get this squared away, that I do want to talk about some comments from John Bodenhammer from the USGA regarding potentially offering LIV players some kind of exemption criteria and other stuff like that. So we'll get to that as well. But let's start with Jack Nicklaus. This is his tournament, his week. This thing's been going on for 50 years at Memorial. It's one of my favorite tournaments to cover. I've covered it a couple of different times, once for myself, once with Golf Channel, and it's always really well done. My sister-in-law used to live in the Columbus area, so it made it really easy to cover. And it feels like every single year, not whether I've covered it in person or not, Jack Nicklaus has complained about the date of this tournament, even though the date of this tournament is basically the same every year. It's more or less the same. I mean, it's not exactly the same every year, but the idea is to have it 2 weeks before the U.S. Open, and it's long been that way. And this year, it was actually one of those eye-opening things that I noticed when the PGA Tour put out the schedule for this year, that Memorial was going to be the week before the U.S. Open, and that the schedule had set itself up to have back-to-back signature events in between, with a major in between. So kind of a sandwich with the U.S. Open in the middle being the meat, and then the U.S. Open surrounded by Memorial and then the Travelers Championship. And then you had the Canadian Open before that. And Jack was asked about that a little bit, talked about that a little bit yesterday, and more or less said, look, we kind of took one for the team for the PGA Tour this year, and we decided that we would work with the tour to have this event instead of 2 weeks prior, as is our longstanding contract, we would have it 1 week prior. And we would be doing a solid to the tour. For whatever reason, they had some kind of plan, and they would do it this year. And then they would only do it this year on the insistence that they revisit the issue and potentially go back to their original date next year, 2 weeks out from a major championship, the U.S. Open. And I kind of get the sense, kind of reading between the lines, that maybe this had something a little bit to do with RBC. RBC sponsors two tournaments. They sponsor the Canadian Open, and they sponsor the Heritage, and they are a big backer of the PGA Tour. And they have been out publicly saying, look, we don't know if we're going to keep going with the PGA Tour, because there's been so much tumult in golf that we're not sure if we want to stick around, and we want to see some unity in the game. We want to see more than what we're getting, and we're not sure if we're going to stick around in the long haul. Canadian Open has been battered over the last several years, as many of you know. Tweeted about it. I think it's kind of become a running joke at this point. Like, what horrible thing is going to happen the week of the Canadian Open? So it either can't happen, or it's totally thrown off track by something else. That did not happen this year, fortunately. Just Robert McIntyre won, and that was great. But yeah, COVID for 2 years. Last year, you had the announcement of the June 6th agreement, all that stuff. So you've got RBC saying, like, what are we getting out of this tournament, of this sponsorship, when we haven't been able to run it? Tour keeps asking us to paying for it. They give us this kind of weird date, all this type of stuff. So I think that's probably why they went to Jack and said, look, your tournament's been on the schedule forever. We will do a make good. We will make this better. But for 1 year, can you do us a favor? Let the Canadian Open go 2 weeks out, get some better players, then have the signature event, because you being a $60 or a $20 million purse, you're going to get the best players, right? You're going to get the top 50 effectively, because they're not going to skip your tournament, and they're not going to skip a $20 million tournament. And yes, we are forcing them to play the week before a major, but it'll all kind of work out. Jack said, okay. So he wants to be 2 weeks out. And actually the rationale he gave is seems strangely appropriate. And the reason I say that is because Jack said, hey, I in my career, I never would have held a tournament and I never would have tried to play the week before a major. That wasn't me. That wasn't something I wanted to do. So if I didn't want to play the week before a major, why would I have a tournament the week before a major? And that would just look kind of weird, right? So if this tournament's about me and my legacy and me hosting it, then it should be reflective of me and my legacy. And I think that's part of the kind of pushback on hosting the week before a major. He just doesn't want to do it. The interesting thing also is that the Memorial has kind of become a old school version of the U.S. Open. The modern version of the USGA's signature championship, right, is not what we understood it to be in the 70s, 80s, 90s, where it was supposed to be impossibly hard. Like you missed the fairway with 6 inches deep rough, you were hacking it out, that kind of stuff. That's not the way the U.S. Open is set up anymore. It's still extremely difficult. It's just difficult in very firm greens, very fast greens. You've got to be able to hit the ball pretty far and somewhat in play, but not perfect. It doesn't have to be down the middle to be successful, because we've learned with statistics that the longer hitter has a bigger advantage when the rough gets deeper and the fairways get narrower because of the way strokes game. I mean, that's bombing gouge to a T. And so you've got Jack saying, well, I won my opens the old way, where you hit it very far. And if you didn't hit the fairway, you paid an enormous penalty and you went from there. And he likes that. He wants championship golf to be that way. He has openly said that modern professional golf is too easy, too accommodating for the professional, that it really isn't a huge penalty on missing the fairway. That, yeah, the greens are fast, but they're in mint shape kind of stuff. And all of that's fine. So he says, okay, we're going to renovate the place. We're going to make it harder. We're going to change that par 3 at 16. We're going to make the fairways narrower, the rough deeper. We're going to make the greens firm and fast. And we're going to play this thing kind of like a U.S. Open. And that's pretty much been the way it's been since 2020. They had those back-to-back events with the Workday Charity Open and then Memorial, right in there. And really since then, that's been the MO of this tournament. Last year, what was it, 7 under that got into a playoff between Victor Hovland and Denny McCarthy. And that golf course played a lot like I remember U.S. Opens of my childhood. And in one sense, you're like, hey, that's kind of cool. And the other, it's more like, I think Jack's kind of offering a mild FU to the governing bodies, because obviously he's been big into rolling back the golf ball, all for rolling back the golf ball. He wants the skill to be returned to being a great player kind of thing. And he's trying to demonstrate that way worked to curtail modern technology, just the same that's the way he thinks championship golf should be set up. There are a lot of layers to Nicklaus there. So all of this comes to say that, like, he's always complained about the date of the tournament, even when the date is what he wants. It's 2 weeks out. As for the kind of wisdom of having a signature event, a major championship, and then another signature event, I'm not so sure. That's a lot of golf. A lot of guys don't like to play really more than 2 weeks in a row. Now they're being asked to play 3 weeks in a row. Or the guys who played in Canada, they're asked to play 4 weeks in a row to play, an event that a great National Open, the Canadian Open, and then these other 3. And that's a lot of golf. And then you're going to get a lull after that leads into the Scottish Open for some players, right? A number of them have committed to play the Scottish Open. Then you get the Open, and then you come back, and then you have that July lull that leads into the playoffs, where you kind of clear the stage if you're one of the top players and say, okay, everyone else who needs to try to get in the top 70 to qualify for the playoffs, have at it. You can go play those couple of events, and then we'll see in the playoffs. So it's a weird structure of the schedule. And I think it's something the tour really needs to think about beyond just Nicklaus's desire to have a date 2 weeks out, but a better spacing of some of the components of the schedule. And maybe you have a signature event in July, and that kind of focuses around the Open. Heck, maybe you go ahead and make the Genesis Scottish Open a signature event. They're a big sponsor. They've got a lot of money on the table. They could probably be rewarded or cajoled into putting a little bit more money into it somehow. So it's an awkward situation for sure. But Jack has done his best and has been a good soldier about this all these years, at least publicly facing. And I think between this tournament and then kind of being the beneficiary, if not the outright host of what is now the Cognizant Classic, he's definitely earned some deferential treatment from the PGA Tour, other than being the first or second best golfer of all time, depending on how you think about that kind of thing. All right, let's switch topics again. This is if you've never listened to Off the First, I'll take a second to explain to you what we actually do in this show when we've recorded it for the last couple of years, which is we take the two biggest stories in golf each day and then just try to talk about those for about 8 to 10 minutes each. So the show is anywhere from 16 to 24 minutes. Maybe we catch a third topic, but in that range. And then we get you on your way with your day. And we'll try to figure out, now that we're doing these shows live a couple of times a week, how often, how long that show needs to be. Does it need to be in the morning? Does it need to be in the middle of the day? And I appreciate feedback on that from you, whether you're listening live or listening, as a podcast listener or watching a replay, whatever it is. That would help me, because I kind of need to know when you're interested in hearing about golf. Obviously, I'm not going to do this like 5, 6, 7, 8 o'clock Eastern at night. That's just not plausible, and it kind of defeats the purpose of the show. But I would like to have kind of a regular time. I could say, hey, tune in at 10 a.m. Eastern every day, 9 a.m. Eastern every day. And we'll do that for a little while here, but then also it will get a little bit more regular toward the end of June. For those of you who have been following GNN for years or kind of heard me say this at different places, Golf Newsnet TV is coming. And we'll put the formal press release announcement out about that in probably the next week or two. Hopefully get it out for the US Open week. It's a good week to do it. And then we're going to start debuting on streaming services. And this show is going to be a part of that network. So we'll have some daily golf talk that will appear live on the streaming channel here on this platform, wherever you're watching. And then also we'll simulcast on GNN Radio, which is our 24/7 golf talk station. So lots to come. This is kind of the tester for what's coming. And there's a lot happening in the next couple of weeks. So year-long process to kind of get this thing off the ground, but very, very excited to bring you more details on that in the very near future. All right, second topic today. Scottie Scheffler is back in action this week. And he played Colonial, right? And he and his lawyer figured out, a way, okay, we need to kind of delay the arraignment here. The Jefferson County folks in Louisville said, hey, he's no different. Nobody is above the law. Scottie Scheffler's not above the law. We need him to be here at the arraignment today, which was kind of foolish, as his lawyer, Steve Romines, kind of said, look, this happens every day. We do this in the court all the time. So they do wind up postponing it. And then Scottie goes and plays in Colonial. And he has this great opportunity to play in front of kind of a home state crowd. He wants to go do that. And, he goes and does that. And then the county eventually kind of gets its act together. The county prosecutor, Jefferson County prosecutor, reviews all the evidence for whatever they don't have from Brian Gillis, because he didn't turn his body cam on. The stuff another officer had that apparently they showed like that very week in a Louisville Metro Council meeting, but never found its way to like our hands, but local media somehow got it. And then you see that and you go, okay, well, yeah, I mean, this is exactly what it looks like. Like the footage they have from the poll cam, from what Scheffler said to the other officer, this all sounds like an enormous misunderstanding. And you don't have the footage from Brian Gillis, so let's just dismiss the whole thing. So they announced the dismissal. So Scheffler's talking for the first time really about that. And he does such a good job of this, of kind of towing the line between wanting, it's kind of saying what he wants to say, which is this was BS, and not, being kind of mean about it, while at the same time understanding the context of it. Right, I'm the world #1 professional golfer. Something bad happened, and and he noted this will affect him for a long time to go. He doesn't want to think about that. He doesn't want to think about being arrested. He doesn't want to think about the mugshot that's going to live on the internet forever. He doesn't want to think about how that might have affected his chances of winning a single season Grand Slam. Who knows what would have happened had he not been arrested? Would he have shot the same 66? Would he have had the same crash on Saturday morning in terms of scoring? Not actual crash, but the crash in scoring, the letdown from the adrenaline that flowed through him on Friday to get him to that 66. Who knows? And I think on one hand, he doesn't want to sound bitter because he's obviously got a ton of money. He's the Masters champion, multi-time major winner, but also wants to say, look, this was crap. This wasn't great. And so he did a very good job, I thought, of kind of towing this line of, I don't want the city of Louisville and its people to pay for what happened in this isolated incident. I don't want Valhalla to never get another major championship again just because I got arrested outside Valhalla because of one cop's actions or my actions not understanding the situation, a big misunderstanding. So they go through that, and he talks about that and says, okay, we could we want to move on, but we were very prepared, my lawyer and I, to not, and floated the idea that they were willing to sue the Louisville Metro Police Department for how Scheffler was treated in this situation if they needed to. Now, mind you, Steve Romines is a guy who won $2 million for Breonna Taylor's surviving partner from the police department, which is operating under a consent decree. So it's not like they would come into a lawsuit. The Louisville Police Department is like the favorite, and certainly with good PR. Be even worse PR for a police department that's taken a lot already, and deservedly so. I mean, as I mentioned in that one city council meeting, they show the footage of Scheffler talking to another officer, and then the city council person, because they're talking about budgeting, by the way, and they go, "Oh, how much money did we spend on those body cams last year? $320,000." Well, I'm taking a ton of flack because your people aren't using them appropriately. And I can't help you if you don't help me. And then they just rake the police chief over the coals for about 5 or 10 minutes for all these different things they want money for, but they aren't using, or they aren't using appropriately. So that would have been even worse for the Louisville Metro Police Department. So all that kind of comes together. We have no evidence. It's bad PR. What are we doing here? It gets dismissed. And then Scottie kind of turns into the guy that talks about being a new dad. Like he does the normal spiel, like he's a normal guy, and he's talking about being a dad, and he's still learning all the stuff about changing diapers and burping, and he outwardly says, "I have no idea what I'm doing." And pro tip: I still have no idea what I'm doing, and I have children who are 11 and 8, so I'm still not really sure what actually is going on in parenthood. But good on you for being able to recognize, hey, there's a lot of scary things happen, a lot of new things happen in your life. You got to balance those out while still trying to be the best golfer in the world. And I hope he does it. I think Scottie has become tremendously more popular because of what happened at Valhalla. I think he picked up, in a weird way, street cred by getting arrested. Not that you need street cred in golf, but I think he's found some. And now he's got an opportunity this week to build a little bit more momentum going into Pinehurst. This is not going to be particularly comparable, at least tee to green, from Pinehurst. I mean, Pinehurst fairways are going to be wider. Obviously, it's Bermuda. You're talking about wiry grass and kind of sandy base for your quote unquote rough areas. You might see similarities in the green speeds, right? I mean, Jack's got it really fast at Muirfield. It's going to be fast and effectively faster at Pinehurst number 2, because the way the greens are set up, the turtleback style greens, the effective landing area, the effective putting area on each of those putting surfaces is substantially smaller than the actual surface area of the greens. And some of that's true at Muirfield too. So there'll be some crossover to that. So you may want to try to win. You may not want to try to win. $4 million is worth trying to win, I think. But at the end of the day, this is a good opportunity to prep. Again, try to get back on the road of normalcy if you're Scheffler, and go from there. So we'll see what happens to him this week. Yeah, I think he's got a lot more people pulling for him. Let's put it that way. I do want to wrap up things today with just one kind of final quick thought, since we didn't get to talk about this, I believe, on Monday when it happened. And that was some comments from John Bodenhammer, who's the chief championships officer of the USGA. He was talking to Golf Channel, and they were talking about, basically the pathway for live golf players to get into major championships. There are 12 live players who are in the U.S. Open field. 3 qualified, 9 were exempt through different criteria, whether you were a past U.S. Open champion like Dustin Johnson or Brooks Koepka, whether you're a current major champion like John Rahm or Cameron Smith, someone who qualified for the Tour Championship like Tyrrell Hatton, guys like that. There are some of those guys who were in the field, but there are only 12. And relative to the Masters and the PGA, where it was like 15 and 18, That's significantly fewer. And there's reasons for that, right? The US Open is the hardest major to qualify for. They have 44 to 50 spots typically, and they have 44 already assigned. They're going to have more assigned, but it'll be close to 50 players in the end that get in through qualifying of some fashion, whether you get in through the direct spots or whether you're an alternate or whatever. So that's not insignificant part of the field, right? I mean, I wish it were more qualifiers, but that's part of the field, right? It's hard to qualify otherwise. You only get a 10-year exemption for winning. It's not like the Masters where if you win once, you're in for life. Same thing's true for the PGA and effectively the Open, even though it's now either 55 or 60, depending on when you won. But, you know, at the same time, you also, in the USGA, and Bodenhammer said, we want to have the best players in our championship. And they can't get in through the official World Golf Ranking because they can't earn enough points, live golf players. And so what do you do? And Bodenhammer pretty much said, hey, we're looking at the possibility of creating some kind of qualifying criteria just for live players, whether that's an exemption category. And that's kind of what it seems like it would be. It's not like they're going to hold a specific qualifier for live golf players. That would be kind of silly, fly in the face of the open concept. So at best, you're going to create like this 24th exemption criteria. There are already 23. So how many players from live do you invite? And I think the live players would tell you, we want 10, 12 spots. And I think the average PGA Tour kind of diehard would say, 3, maybe. I think the reality is live is like a 10-person tour. For better or for worse, it's a 10-person tour. And a lot of other players are just kind of there to be there most weeks. They might be able to qualify for a major championship and be that good through open qualifying. They might be able to compete in a live golf event. They've got one in Houston this week. They might be able to do that on an occasional basis, but they're not consistent. So you've got players like Rahm and Bryson and Neiman, Taylor Gooch to a degree, Dustin Johnson, Cam, even though he's on the decline, it seems, Cam Smith, guys like that. Think about that number, like 8, 9 guys. Well, most of them are already in the majors. So maybe what you decide to do is you offer spots to the top 8 players in the Live Golf League standings through a certain date in the year or from the prior year, whatever that is. They choose that. And then those players get invited. And as it's going to turn out, a lot of the players who get invited get in through other means anyway. And that would make sense. But maybe you catch a stray and like a Dean Burmester gets in or a Taylor Gooch gets in or, whoever. Effectively kind of only adding 2 or 3 more players to the field. Liv would be happy, right? Maybe that kind of is the test pattern for how you do it for the Open and the PGA Championship, maybe the Masters, whatever. And then it just kind of squashes that piece of things because apparently we're not going anywhere on this merger stuff anytime soon. So then your next step is to figure out if you're going to do that, what's the backlash of potentially diluting the number of open qualifier spots? Or do you peel that back some and you take some of the exemption criteria you've created, like for the Race to Dubai standings, effectively got 5 people eligible through that. You could have, I'm really not sure where you pull from because you want the amateur players to get in. They just created the one for the NCAA Men's Division I individual champion. You just created the one for the Korn Ferry Tour points winner from the prior season. So you can't just rip those back away. The multi-win exemption thing really hardly applies to anybody. So that, whatever, you take that out, I guess. Maybe the multiple cutoff dates for the top 60 in the OWGR kind of covers your ground. So you're not losing qualifying spots. You're not losing the character of the Open while still being able to give live players some spots, I guess. We'll see what happens there. But it sounds like they're moving toward that path because the PGA Tour and the Saudis aren't moving toward a final agreement on their end. And tomorrow is the 1-year anniversary of the announcement of the framework agreement. That thing that kind of shocked all of us, that happened 1 year ago. And we seem no closer to a conclusion, whether that's a final agreement, an agreement to never agree, whatever the heck it is. But we seem no closer to that answer than we were a year ago when I started getting text messages on my phone like, hey, did you see this? No, we'll see. Maybe they'll just use that 1-year anniversary to announce a deal, a surprise deal, but I doubt it. All right, that's going to do it for us today on 2 Off the First. Thank you so much for watching the live stream. Thank you so much for listening. If you're listening on replay or watching on replay, I appreciate that too. We're going to give this another try, but not tomorrow. So we're not going to do Thursdays and Fridays for a little while. On Thursday, tomorrow, I'm going to be playing in a member guest practice round. And then Friday, the member guest starts. It's on Saturday, playing with one one of my good buddies who's a parent at my kid's school, and we're going to try and take it down. We've taken down a flight. We've never taken down a whole member guest. We're going to give a shot at that. We'll come back next Monday, and we'll do these live streams. We're going to be at Pinehurst number 2 next week. I'll go down there on Tuesday. Probably do Monday and Tuesday streams here at home, and then Wednesday there. And try to do something Thursday, Friday. We'll see. But the regulations on that may be a little tricky. All right. If you're listening to the podcast, leave a 5-star review. It helps. If you're watching the show, leave me a comment. Give me a follow. Follow on whatever platform you're watching. I appreciate that too. We'll be back on Monday with another live show. In the meantime, we'll do recorded versions of 2 Off the First on your favorite podcasting service, whether that's iTunes, Spotify, whatever, Thursday, Friday. And we'll talk to you then. So thanks so much for watching. We'll catch you next time on 2 Off the First.